But in a situation where you find that a person look at the same,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
All right, welcome back and thanks for staying with us. It is still daybreak on Trust Television. Joining us today, it is time for the dailies, as we said earlier. So joining us today is Nurudeen Abdallah. He's an editor, 21st Century Chronicle, and he's here to review the stories making headlines this morning. Good morning, sir, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning.
Welcome to the show.
Good morning, thank you.
All right, so we will start with a Daily Trust newspaper. And the main headline here says, Ministers sack looms as Buhari supervises appraisal. Ministers sack looms as Buhari supervises appraisal. And we have a kicker here that says, warns cabinet members on mandate delivery. President in race against time, says ex-permanent secretary. We also have a headline here that says, anti-open grazing, it's senseless to enact enforceable or unenforceable law, so says Obaseki. Moving on, further devaluation will worsen poverty, unemployment, expert counters Oshibajo. And we have this one here that says, attempts to cause rift between Tinubu Oshibajo will fail, says presidency. And you can find that headline in page 32. In page 10, you can find the headline that says, after 20 million naira ransom, Bungudu Emir still in captivity. And the final headline we'll take here is, constituents tackle Gbajabiamila over delay in declaring late Plateau rep seat vacant. And that you can find in page 32.
Okay, let's move on to the next daily this morning, looking at the Nation newspaper. Sit at home continues in Southeast. You also find police warn NSAS protesters in Lagos, Osun. Why I stopped Ndubisi Kanu for burial by judge. You also find Oyo not denying council's funds, says Makinde. That's on page 6 of the Nation newspaper. And the headline says, Buhari lists achievement. And the writer is saying, government targets local production of weapons. Another rider is saying 13.3 billion for community policing. You'll also find, I am in the governorship race for the forgotten, says Oni. You also find Naira exchange rate should reflect market realities, says Oshibaja. These are some of the stories on the Nation newspaper.
All right, with that, we'll move on to Blueprint newspaper. And the major headline there, written in bold, says, how Buhari's post-COVID-19 stimulus rescued economy. And we have a writer here that says, task CBN, commercial banks on speedy release of structured lending. Another writer here states, wants Naira value to be determined by market reality. And this next writer here says 14 billion Naira of the 471 billion Naira farmers' loans disbursed. And final writer, 7 billion Naira from 140 billion Naira for 5 million solar connection also. All right, we also have a report here on page 9 that states 22,000 girls die of child marriage related complications annually, and that is according to a report. We also have this headline that says the federal government approves 13.3 billion naira for community policing take-off, and this is to commence local production of military equipment and also establishes 75 billion naira youth investment fund. All right, we also have this particular headline here that says APC Congress, drug test mandatory for Kano contestants. And you can find that headline in page 16 of Blueprint newspaper. And this other headline here that says, amidst zoning controversy, PDP decides Mark Mekarfi Ayu's fate today. And that you can find on page 18. Bayero graces turbaning of Mustafa as Turaki of Ilorin, that you can find on page 9. And Nalda land, not for Ruga, says ES. That particular one you can find on page 22.
Okay, let's move on to the Punch newspaper this morning. You find right at the top, budget. Federal government allocates 4.2 billion to moribund Ajakuta Steel. You'd also find on page 23, work begins on 16.39 trillion budget. Senate panel gets document today. You'll also find on page 12, prelate proposes 25,000 largesse for repentant Boko Haram bandits. And on page 22, experts differ as Oshibajo says exchange rate artificially low. And the big headline there is saying states lament deductions, demand probe, subsidy rises to 8.2 billion naira daily. And the rider is saying field subsidy opaque. NMPC acts as government on its own, says Commissioners Forum. And another rider says states helpless over deductions. Federal government a dictator. This is according to a Delta State Commissioner. And below the pictorial there, where you'd find President Muhammadu Buhari. Sit at home gunshots, rock Anambra guard killed in Enugu, Imo grounded. You'd also find on page 4 and page 5, 250 investors lament as 20 billion agribusiness scheme promoted by Nollywood actors collapses. You also find on page 30, ICPC arraigns ex-presidential aide Obono Obla for certificate forgery. These are some of the headlines on the Punch this morning.
Okay, we'll take one more headline here, and that is from the Guardian newspaper. And we have this one on page 4 that says, research workers begin indefinite strike tomorrow, alleged misuse of COVID-19 funds. We also have on page 4 still, intrigues as Supreme Court reserves ruling in governor's 66 billion naira judiciary suit against federal government. And on page 6 here says, 6 women, 9 children escape from Boko Haram in Yobe. And if you go to page 21, you'd find a headline here that says, Customs restores VAT, multiple charges on imported aircraft spare parts. We also have this one here right on the front page that says, Southeast gets secretary as micro-zoning crisis threaten PDP convention. And we'll move on to the major headline on the Guardian newspaper. Federal government faces tough choices over likely naira devaluations. And then we have a writer here that says, AFDB faults federal government's $35.5 billion debt toll, economic development model. And another writer here that states, we're making progress on infrastructure development, says Buhari. This one here, this final writer here says, Nigeria weakens to 565 naira per dollar. And these are the headlines we'll be taking on the Guardian newspaper today.
Okay, let's review some of the stories, some of the top headlines this morning, starting with the one on the Daily Trust newspaper, which says, retreat. Ministers sack looms as Buhari supervises appraisal. Now, there are speculations that there are likelihoods that President Muhammad, there's going to be more sacks, as the appraisals come up. What do you think about that?
Okay, I think more ministers need to be sacked because it is only the Buhari administration that appoints people and leave them to do what they do without sanctioning and all that. If you look in the previous administrations, you append your signature on your sack letter the moment you are appointed as minister, so that the presidency will just announce it. You understand? But when Buhari came, he changed the narrative. He changed the narrative in the sense that between 2015 to 2019, he sacked no single minister. Two left. Fortunately, the two women in the government. One got a UN appointment. The other one controversially resigned. Maybe she resigned because she was brought up in the UK. The same minister in the same government with the same controversy, like Kemi Adioson's. You know, he broke the oaths. He even had the audacity to go to court. He didn't serve in the NYSC. He went to court and he survived it. So that has been the trend until recently, almost 2 years into his last tenure, when suddenly two ministers were sacked. And the sack, yeah, as negative as many people portray it, is good for democracy, it's good for good governance, it's good for Nigerians. And like I said elsewhere, other ministers now will sit up. You know, when Buhari makes an appointment, unless you get into a serious controversy that's through steal of money and what have you, you will do the entire time without being, okay, what is happening and what have you. And this appraisal, this is what she should have been doing maybe even every 2 years. So 6 years after his, there is a retreat and his appraisal, he should have done 2 appraisals earlier. You understand? So that people will know. And I hope this time around, schedule will be given to the appointees. Targets should be specifically mentioned to them. You are Minister XYZ, you have target ABC.
Well, some would say, on the contrary, that he is on a race against time towards the 2023 elections, and he's doing this, you know, against that time. Are you of that opinion as well?
Not really. Buhari won't be on the ballots by 2023. He's serving his last term as president of Nigeria. Buhari may be in the last instance. The constitution provides only for 2 terms. You understand? I think what he did, actually, he just realized that I have less than 21 months as president of Nigeria. I have made a lot of promises. You remember he contested the election more than 4 times before he eventually won. Mm-hmm. And most of the key issues he promised Nigerians, you know, so he wasn't able to implement them. For instance, take the power sector, for instance. Mambila is key. But there was nothing on Mambila for 6 years. And maybe that's why the other guy has to be fired, to bring a new guy. Okay, you are on the seat now, and you know, these are your targets. These are the things that you should do within so time. And you know, take other sectors as well. There are so many ministries that you see that nothing is happening. All the ministers will just be caught in some unnecessary controversies, abandoning their statutory mandate. So I think this is whether more ministers are sacked or not. To even say that this is the first time the newspaper are saying that ministers will be sacked in 6 years. You understand? So this is good for democracy, good for Nigerians, good for even the president himself. At least now there is people will be okay. It won't be a jolly right. I may be fired.
But why did it take this long? Why wasn't it done sooner?
I think that is the Buhari style, like I said. He has this tendency that when you guys complain, maybe it has to do with his military mentality or background. He's a converted Democrat, like he severally said. But you remember the service chiefs? So much campaign, fire these guys, fire these generals. They have failed and what have you. But the man is something like this. Until suddenly, he wanted to take Nigerians by surprise.
Right.
Then that the service chiefs were fired. And even these ministers, when the former agri minister said that you can eat and decent meal with 30 naira in Kano, the man did like this until his cup was full and he was just giving the boot. So we think that this is good for democracy, you know. The ministers now will sit up Those who always move with siren disturbing people now will go to the office, or they will be on oversight. So I think better late than never. That's it.
Okay, let's talk about this particular headline. That's the anti-open grazing, and it says Obaseki here saying that it is senseless to enact unenforceable law, and a lot of governors in the south and also in the east do not believe in, open grazing. What's your take on this?
Do you know this issue has been politicized so much? It has apparently become the agenda of the governors ahead 2023. Like he said, yeah, it's difficult to enforce it, but another thing, it will continue to brew violence, particularly in the south. You remember the Sunday Igbohos. If the government cannot stop the herders from grazing in their open lands, then he volunteered and he led a militia attacking, ransacking, maiming, and the herders. My thinking simply is, animal husbandry as it is now, is a business. These herders are mostly from the north. The north has the land. Instead of begging, southern governors allow open grazing or not, why can't you solve the problem? Why don't we have, how much does it cost? After all, you can do it in Niger. If the guy in Benue is against it, you can do it in Nasarawa. If the guy in Plateau is against it, you can do it in Kaduna. And so on and so forth. You understand? Again, now, even some of the southern governors are keen in because there is money in it. It's a business. If you do it, two things. You will know the census of your herders. Instead of them just moving around the street, causing confusion, kidnapping for ransom. You will know how many are there. You should be able to figure out who are the bad elements among them. Two, you will have value for money. You will educate their kids. They will not just move like savages in the bush. When they grow up, they will come to the street and they will be kidnapping us for ransom. Thirdly, even the animals will be held there. You understand? During the colonial time, the lands were earmarked for this. But subsequent regimes came and they just abandoned it. Even the roots were taken over. So that is the essence of this conflict. And the Southerners are saying, we don't want it. They have the right to do that. Whether they are going to enforce it or not is another thing entirely different. And mark you, in Southwest, for instance, they have the Amotekun. Only the South is now, because maybe of the IPOP issues, they couldn't set up a sort of a militia to enforce it. So the best way is for the northern governor to sit down and look inward and stop this problem once and for all. And the federal government is even investing in it. There is money from the Netherlands that you can warehouse these people. The essence of moving from one end up to this thing can't be forever.
Okay. Now, some experts are saying that in order to make the open grazing law, come into play, they need to involve some of these pastoralists in finding a balance to what will work for them. Do you think that will change anything?
That is not possible with the charged political atmosphere. And like you, the governors are not military governors, they are politicians. Like I said, the whole thing is purely economic and social, but it has been politicized. Kusena, you will just measure your acceptance to the people on your stand on open grazing if you are a southern governor. You understand? That is it. Obaseki, I'm surprised that he said that. You understand? Issue is, the moment you say something that is not clear or that it seems to be supporting against the ban, then it will pitch you against the people. And you're a politician. You're either seeking re-election oh, we are going to Senate, and what if you want to impose your stooge after you leave office? So these are the issues. Engaging the pastoralists, for example, they did it in Benue. Before the Southern started, the Taraba guy did it. Darius Ishaku banned open grazing by the law of the State Assembly. Autumn did it. Like I said, the whole thing was political. And that was why even in clear implement, like in the case of Autumn, as a herder, the hurdles for acquiring land to ranch my cattle in Benue is almost impossible the way he did it. Certain people were targeted and what have you. So the whole thing is strictly political. And in this charged political atmosphere, engaging, I don't see how the Mieti Allah, that's been the political wing. The herders will be moving to the government house in Akure or Lagos or Ibadan for a meeting on open grazing. That will not go down well with the people there, right, because of the politicization of the issue. But by and large, the North, we have 90 northern states. They should work this thing out. These herders can be accommodated here in far better, economically viable environment if they are ready to do it.
Okay. Now let's talk about a headline that seems to be on every page or every newspaper, and that's the devaluation of Naira. And the Vice President, Oshibaja, saying further devaluation will worsen poverty, unemployment. Expert counters Oshibaja as well. All right, so can you just, let's have your reaction to this.
So the Naira actually is in a free fall for quite some time, getting to almost to 600, like you said in one of the headlines now. To $1. And why? I think largely, when this government came, for more than 2 years, newspapers, commentators, economists were asking, who is the president's special advisor on economy? The whole thing is about the economy. The whole thing is about the cost of bread. Yes, the whole thing, whatever you do, cost of bread is very important. And look at it now. So, more than 2 years after, the president eventually had a special advisor on economics, domiciled in the office of the vice president. About a year ago, he finally had an economic team. The team was populated by eminent economists, experts. But what's the problem? When last did you see them meeting the president, or even on telly? So that is the issue. I think the presidency as a whole, didn't give economy that much desired attention. And that is why. And secondly, the CBN, in trying to save the Naira, between September 2020 to September this year, they dish out more than 20 policies. But apparently, the policies were not working.
The masses were at the receiving end.
Yes. And why? It has to do with your production. It has to do basically with your production, or else you will be eating away your foreign reserves. And that's where we are. So the Naira continues. There is no grammar you will speak. The value is depreciating by the day. Check the cost of bread. So everybody is feeling across the country. What you buy 10 Naira is now getting to 50 Naira.
And bakers are actually threatening to shut down.
So I think apart from soaring up our forex, take even the policy of banning sale of forex, banning official CBN giving Bureau de Change Operators. Actually, it didn't work out that way. I think the government, particularly the CBN, and other fiscal policy regulators, they need to really review this thing. What exactly is the problem? Because the inflation is too much.
So would you say our economic models are not working?
Not economic model per se. You may have a very perfect economic models that work elsewhere, but it's about the implementation. Look at even our forex regime. Some manufacturers are saying there are about 3. There is one for Husseina, there is one for Dashim, there is one for me, and there is one for the general public. And you remember some 2-3 years ago how the forex thing has been bastardized. The former central bank governor and the former mayor of Kano once even accused the CBN of dishing out forex to people close to the government. You can sit down in your garden, make some phone calls, and you'll be allocated forex, and you can make millions from your sitting room. So these are the issues. And you know, when in those days, people think when they say inflation, they will say it's economic grammar. But now people know what inflation means, and they now know what purchasing power means. Now they know what GDP per capita means. If you have 100 naira, take the public transport. How much was it before? And how much is it now? How much is a bottle of water? So the thing is coming, the package is just collapsing. So the government certainly need to do something, because everybody is feeling it. The rich, the poor, and the dying middle class. So it's clear, and everybody, and it's not the model per se, but even the implementation. You can have a very perfect model, you can have a very nice car, but when you decide where you have to put the gas, you put water there, what do you expect? When you say you on it and allow it to run for maybe 10 minutes, but you refuse to do that, you just ignite it and keep going, you'll have problem. So certainly it is not the model per se.
Right.
But even the implementation, are we implementing the model as it should be? So these are those issues that we have to look inward and save the situation before it's too late.
Okay. Now let's move on to another headline, and it's basically a report from UNICEF saying 1.3 million Nigerian girls drop out of school annually. If you recall, yesterday the International Day for the Girl Child was celebrated, and I don't know, what do you think? Do you think insecurity has a major role to play in this?
Sure. As a parent, for instance, and you live in one of the northwest states plagued by banditry, you have 2 choices to make. To either send your girls out to school to be abducted by some bandits, taken to the bush, abused, or you live at home. So these are the issues. We had Chibok. We have Depchi. That's the Boko Haram. Now the time has come here. We had Kagara. We had Kankara. We had Zampara. And so on and so forth. The figure is even not even scarier, even as it is, if you look at the number of abductions that took place just in the last 2 years. More than 5,000 schools closed just within 6 months after the abduction in Kankara, the president's hometown, in December 2020. And April, when the Kagara Zampara abduction took place. So parents were scared. What I'm saying, even though leaving them at home is equally not a safe strategy, because these bandits, they can ransack schools. They ransack schools because it makes political statement, and they get a larger chunk of ransom. As I'm talking to you now, more than 80 school children abducted more than 100 days ago in FGC Yauri are still with the bandits. 2 months ago, you had the BBC report where some parents were even saying that the bandits called them. They are no longer negotiating for ransom. But they're saying they've married off the girls. Just imagine as a parent. So all these things will certainly affect the rate of the dropout and even enrollment. We are battling for long because there are more than 110 million children out of school. More than 80 of them from the northern part of the country. And banditry is here with us again. The worst part are the girl child. Because of some conservative socio-economic and cultural reasons, our girls are still hawking on the streets. We haven't tackled that yet. We are begging them to send them to school. Okay, till now, you send them to school and they've been taken away by bandits. You remember those of even in Islamic schools, religious schools are not. What happened to the Bethel Baptist School? They pay so much money. You sell houses, you sell all your belongings to rescue a child. What happened to that Islamic school in Niger? The bandits are so heartless, they even took away 5-year, 6-year, 3-year-old from a school that is being run like an orphanage. So these are the issues. How do we tackle this? We tackle this by ensuring the safety of these children. You can only ensure safety when you eliminate these bandits and banditry once and for all. That's the way to go. If not, if this thing continues, maybe in the next 2 years, this figure will triple or more.
So would you say the federal government strategy, to tackle these issues is not yielding any results?
Not really, because these are figures collated over time. And if you look at what is happening in Zamfara, so many, the federal government actually has deployed so many measures, which is drastic and desperate measures. Mind you, in some part of Zamfara, in the part minus Gusau, there is not even mobile network. Weekly markets closed down. Filling station shut. Banning of movement of livestock in and outside the states. Selling of foil on jerry cans. And what have you? So the government has adopted really a drastic measure to ensure that these people are routed out. But again, even the military, I think they have their own limitations. Because what they are doing in Zamfara today should be something that be done across the red zones. Kaduna, Sokoto, Katsina, and part of Kebbi in particular. But we are only doing it in Zamfara. And now the bandits are fleeing to Niger, they are fleeing to Kaduna, they are fleeing to Sokoto, escalating, more attacks in the neighboring state. If, for instance, the military has the manpower, material power to cordon these areas and do it once and for all, you do the shelling, you send the troops to eliminate it so that within a time we are done. But now most of these guys were moving to, bad guys are going to Niger, they are going to other. So after Zamfara, now we have to come to Niger, for instance. The 5 frontline local government where the bandits are holding forth to repeat the same thing in Kaduna. So the federal government, there are so many factors. The military, even though we have been at war, Boko Haram exposed so much. There was so much rot, politicization, lack of men, lack of materials. The president is talking about will soon start our manufacturing local weapons. This is something we should have done long ago. So the government is adopting desperate measures because everybody is affected by this. As a politician, I don't think it would be nice sit down as a governor, as a local government chairman, or even as a lawmaker, say that you can't go to a village, you can't meet your constituents, or you read the newspaper say that they have ransacked this village, taken away, abuse. Even look at the stories from Katsina. Even the age we are not spared by these savages. Took them away, abused them. You understand?
Right.
You read the story of a woman, 4 months pregnant, taken to the bush, and she gave birth even in the bush.
Terrible indeed.
Terrible.
Well, thank you so much, Nurudeen Abdallah, the editor and 21st Century Chronicle. We hope to have you next time on the show.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for sharing.